And now I'd like to introduce our Ken Kimball, Vice President of Development for Offshore Wind and Anagrid Renewables. Ken?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Pete, for filling in for John. I understand he's a little busy tonight with some other matters. And thank you to Cindy and the Osterville Library for having us. This is actually our fourth time to be invited to OVA. So I really want to just extend our thanks to you to giving us this opportunity to have a dialogue and share information and talk. Let me just make sure, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if my voice starts dropping, I'm not using the mic, just let me know. So what we're hoping to do tonight, I brought a number of people from our project team. I want to briefly introduce them. We brought a bunch of people because you never know what questions are going to be asked, and we wanted to make sure we had the right people here to answer them. We want to do that. Then we want to share some new information with you that you haven't seen from prior meetings about the onshore route, the landing at Dowses Beach, the construction schedule, the permitting process, which we anticipate going, and then discussion about not only community benefits for the town of Barnstable writ large, but for the community of Osterville. But before we share that new information, I just wanted to check in. How many people have not been to any of these presentations so far? Okay. And how many people would like a quick overview of the project and who we are before we give the new information? Okay, I think so. I'm going to just start with that. I'll try to go through it quickly because some of you have heard that presentation, but some of the people who are the experts on that part of the presentation are here. So if I go too fast and you have questions about it, we can get to that when we're done. And the only other thing I'd suggest is I want to make sure we get all this information out. So I'd recommend we hold the questions until the whole presentation is done. There'll be 3 speakers. That way we can make sure everything gets out. We will stay here as long as needed to answer all questions, so there's no rush about asking. So why don't we get started? Whoops. And I just want to introduce the team. I'll just ask them to raise their hands. Christina Hoffman, the director of the project. There's Christina. Todd Monson, the project manager. Justice Nyarko, who is our interconnections manager. So if there's questions about interconnections, he's the person. Justice. Erin Harizi, permitting manager. Pat Johnson, you all know him, but we'll introduce him again. Rachel Lake, outreach coordinator, who you're going to get to know. Ken Fitzgerald, our senior engineer from Stantec, who will be talking about the Dowses Beach landing, and Mark Bergeron from Epsilon Associates, who's our permitting specialist. So that's the team. I'm just gonna, first of all, who are we? Avangrid Renewables. We are part of the company known as Avangrid. We are the 3rd largest renewable energy generator in the United States, with many onshore wind and solar facilities. John often says we're an Oregon-based company, which is true, but our offshore renewables headquarters is here based in Boston. Most of the people who I've identified work in the Boston office, and several of them actually grew up on Cape Cod. So we have ties to this community that are substantial. And just as we are a leader on onshore renewable energy, we seek to be one of the world leaders in offshore renewable energy. And we are blessed to be involved in 3 very large, very transformative projects here in New England, about 25 or 30 miles south of Cape Cod. By the way, I want to underline 25 to 30 miles. So far away from land, no one in Cape Cod will see these turbines. That is quite different from the project that I think many of you are familiar with that had a start many years ago that was about 5 miles away. So we learned our lesson that these projects are much farther away, no visual impact to people on Cape Cod. And we have this essentially 3 projects, each in different phases, all based on lease areas that we got from the federal government during a public auction a number of years ago. The first project is called Vineyard Wind 1. We own 50% of that project. That's the project where we were doing construction on Osterville Beach. So I'm sure many of you have seen that. That project will be operational in 2023 or perhaps 2024. It will be 800 megawatts of clean, renewable energy. The first large-scale offshore wind farm in the United States. And we're going to be selling that power to the Commonwealth. On the heels of that is the second project down, Park City Wind. That's going through the permitting process right now. It's about 2/3 of the way through. The landing is proposed at Craigville Beach. We're working with the Centerville Civic Association and others to complete the permitting of that project. That's operational a few years after. And then the third project, Commonwealth Wind, which we're here to talk about tonight, is a 1,200 megawatt project where the power also will be sold to the Commonwealth. That's the project for which we seek to land at Dowses Beach and do a cable route through town, which we'll go over. And finally, we do own another project in Virginia, North Carolina border, which we're also advancing. The white line is the cable that's going to take the power from the different parts of the wind farm and deliver it to Cape Cod. That cable route was not by accident. It was an agreed upon route that the federal government, the fishing community, and various stakeholders agreed to. And the idea was that our project should not have cables going all over Nantucket Sound. We should keep them all within one about 1,500 foot wide corridor. So that's the reason why those cables are projecting there, at least in part. You'll also see two black lines between Nantucket and the Cape and Martha's Vineyard and Falmouth. Those are other electric cables. And I only put them on the map just to make sure everyone knew that providing electricity through seabed cables and landing at a beach is nothing new. We will be doing that for that project. It already exists. It's been done for a very long time. And so we have beaches on Cape Cod supporting electric cable infrastructure right now. At the last meeting in June, we spent a lot of time answering the question, why Cape Cod? Why the town of Barnstable? Why Dowses Beach? And I'm just going to give a very quick summary of that. And again, if people are interested in diving into that subject in more detail, we can do that. Probably the most important factor, and this is something I learned coming to this company 7 or 8 months ago. It's surprising, but there's actually very few locations along the coast where the grid has the capacity to take this power. And many of those locations, other companies have gotten something called queue rights, which is like a place in line. And so they have, these other companies that are building these facilities have the right to connect. And once they do that, there's no capacity left. So it turns out that the West Barnstable substation, where we want to connect the Park City and the Commonwealth wind projects, has enough capacity to take our power. And we have the queue rights so that we are guaranteed to have the right to connect. So that was a fundamental siting decision for us. And we looked at a lot of other alternatives, other substations to try to connect to, and our analysis yielded the conclusion that this was really the only viable spot. Justice is here. If you have more questions about that, he'll be happy to answer them. So that helps explain why Cape Cod. Why Barnstable? Well, it's obviously the closest landing place to that substation. And if one of your goals is to avoid unnecessarily excavating roads and causing disturbance, you're trying to get the shortest point you can from the landing to the substation. And the third issue then is, well, why Dowses Beach? And to be honest, it's a bit of a process of elimination. The criteria that we're looking for at a landing, first of all, an accreting beach, so a beach where sand is coming in as opposed to losing sand, is a good factor. But the most important factor is a large parking lot where we can house and stage construction equipment without tearing up a lawn or damaging a wetland or cutting down a lot of trees. So having a big parking lot is really important. It also has to be big enough that we can fit all the equipment that we need on the site. And finally, it's preferable if the landing can be as far away from residences and businesses as possible. And Dowses Beach does hit all of those criteria. It does. It wasn't our very first choice. Our first choice was Kimball Beach, so that's where we went for the first project. Our second choice was Craigville, where we're planning to go for Park City. But Dowses Beach was the next best alternative after those were considered. This is just a map to help you see where the different projects are. The one in green is Vineyard Wind 1, landing at Kimball Beach and going up to a substation there. Park City Wind to land at Craigville Beach and go on that blue route up to the West Barnstable substation. And finally, Dowses Beach, which has two possible routes from the landing to the substation, and we'll be talking in a moment about that. The benefits of these projects. First of all, just from a climate change perspective, and I'm sure that's in everyone's mind these days with the horrible flooding in Pakistan, the horrible wildfires in California, the droughts. It's a massive amount of clean renewable energy. It's really big scale, a clean energy grid. So that's an enormous advantage. It also has significant advantages for Cape Cod energy users, because part of what we have to do to connect is upgrade the grid facilities here on the Cape, so it'll improve reliability. It will massively cut greenhouse gas emissions associated with the production of electricity. 750,000 homes will be powered by this project. And it's also a massive job creator because this is a whole new industry in the United States. And then locally, in each of these projects, and we hope the same will be for this one, we've negotiated host community agreements with the town. I know that town manager Mark Ellis was here last month and talked about those host community agreements. Those are $16 million above and beyond the personal property taxes for each of them. Beyond that, for the other two projects, we are collaborating with the town on its installation of sewer lines. We are opening the roads for the town, doing a lot of the design and engineering work. We're laying the electric cables around the same time that the sewer is installed. And then one entity is responsible for closing and recoding the road, and that's us. And we're saving the town millions of dollars in sewer construction by doing it in this collaborative way. We also, in the Vineyard Wind experience, we had to relocate quite a few water mains, about 7,000 linear feet of water mains. And we did that at our expense. So we also improved the water supply lines for that project. So that is an enormous benefit to the town. We also have worked hard to minimize the disruption and the inconvenience. We won't work on these beaches or on these roads in the summer months. We can time things that we can move the cables at about 100 to 200 feet a day, which limits the amount of time that any individual homeowner or business is disrupted. And finally, and this, the town really deserves a lot of credit. In the host community agreement, they held us to a standard of protection of the groundwater that goes above and beyond what anyone else has done in terms of building substations and protecting against the leaking of fluids. So all these things happen with these first two projects. I hope they will for this one as well. So I'm going to just talk about one other thing, which is the onshore route option, and then I want to turn it over to Ken Fitzgerald at Stantec to talk about the landing. So this is to focus on the route. So we're going to land at Dowses Beach. We have to get to that substation, which I showed you a map of. And there are two viable routes to get there. And we've done some geotechnical study to evaluate that these routes have appropriate soils. They're about the same length. They're functionally similar in many ways. One is we're going to call the Main Street route. The other is the Old Mill Road route. We're going to propose both of these routes in our permitting. So both of them are going to go through the permitting process. Both of these routes will be subject to public comment and public input of the town, of you, of the various state and local authorities that have to grant permits. So we're gonna keep both of them. And I do want to be honest, we've heard different things from different people about which one's better. Some people have said clearly they would prefer that we do Old Mill Road. They cite the fact that Osterville has a busy business district, so the Main Street alternative. So I think what we've heard is either way, there'll be some inconvenience and disturbance, but less so if you use Old Mill Road than if you use Main Street. And that's a perfectly legitimate comment, which we take to heart. But we've also heard from a number of people who have said they would prefer that we go through Main Street. They see this as an opportunity to do something very big and very permanent for the town, which is to have that same collaboration on the sewer line that we have with the other two projects. And we've heard from those people that Osterville is facing a very urgent problem with water degradation in the 3 Bays area. We know from that letter that DEP sent a few months ago that DEP is getting pretty serious about this and is threatening to require homeowners to upgrade their individual septic systems. And you heard from the town manager last month that if we were to go through Main Street, he would expedite the process of developing the sewer line so that we could do it at the same time. We also heard from a water commissioner that the water lines underneath Main Street were built in the 1930s and are in need of repair and replacement. So there's a real argument that since Main Street's going to get ripped up at some point, excavated and infrastructure is going to be put in, it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when. Why not do all these projects at the same time? Why not accelerate the town's sewering of Main Street? And why not save the town millions and millions of dollars, because we will make the same commitment for Osterville that we did for the other projects, which is we'll be responsible for the paving and the recoding. So I do think those are fairly compelling public interests. And I want to be honest and transparent. The regulations allow us to propose 2 routes. They do require us to identify which in our mind is the preferred one and which is the alternative. And our current thinking is to designate the Main Street route as the preferred and Old Mill as the alternative. That doesn't mean, by the way, that we get to dictate this. That's our opinion. That has to get tested through the process. But I want to be honest with people that that is our thinking and the basis of the thinking. It may change over time, but as we try to weigh the temporary disturbance to people along Main Street, which we think we can minimize through picking times of year that are appropriate, through moving the crews fast through those areas. When we think about that temporary inconvenience and we balance it against this very significant long-term fiscal and environmental benefit, to us, the balance comes out to Main Street. But I know not everyone in this room is going to agree with that, and we should have a healthy discussion about it. Okay, so I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask Ken Fitzgerald from Stantec to take us through the next part of the presentation, which is about the landing at Dowses Beach, the cabling, and other items. Do you have a clarifying question? Because otherwise.
Yes, please. Park City Wind Project, if I understand it correctly, will provide 100% of the energy in Connecticut, right?
Yes, as a matter of contract, no, as a matter of physics. So let me explain.
Yeah.
I know it's Connecticut signed a long-term contract where they've agreed to pay a fixed price for that power. And that long-term contract is what enables us to go to a bank and get financing for this project, because we can show an income stream over time. So Connecticut is basically funding the project. And they get renewable energy credits for doing that. They also get the ability to say, we are taking action on climate change because we caused this 800 megawatt project to come into existence. So that's the law. But the physics of it is electricity, once it goes into the grid, goes where it's going to go. And where we are, most of that electricity is going to end up going to Cape Cod and Boston, because that is the easiest path for the electricity to flow. So we don't, once it goes into the grid, you can't, Connecticut doesn't get the literal electrons from the turbines. It gets kind of the bragging rights to have made this facility happen.
There wasn't a place for Park City Wind to happen off of Connecticut shore. It had to happen off.
No, because the Connecticut shore is sort of Long Island Sound. That wasn't an area that was leased by the federal government. And I think, I could be wrong about this, it doesn't have anywhere near the winds that the locations that we're building have. So the only way that we could direct electrons literally to Connecticut would be to send a cable directly to Connecticut. But what we're doing is injecting that power into the grid. So I'm gonna, again, not take questions because I really want the engineers to go for it. So Ken, can you come up?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ken. So again, I'm Ken Fitzgerald. I'm senior principal at Stantec Consulting. I'm based in Quincy, Massachusetts. And the project is being supported by our local Hyannis office on Main Street. So through the previous image you saw, we have these federal lease areas where the wind turbines are located, about 35 miles from the coast of Cape Cod. And the Commonwealth Wind Project is going to include 3 400-megawatt circuits. And they're going to hit land with something like this. This is a subsea cable cross section. Not exactly the one that we will necessarily have, but fairly close. So this cable will start probably about 15 miles off the southern coast of Martha's Vineyard, run about 35 miles, and then hit the beach at Dowses. And what you're looking at here, it's this is an alternating current type circuit. We have the 3 power leads, if you will, that transmit the power. And then there's a series of smaller cables that are actually communication cables. And what those do is it sends communication signals that are monitoring the turbines, monitoring the offshore substation, and it's going to carry those signals along with the power circuits to land and ultimately to the new substation that'll be a little bit further inland in Cape Cod. The process to which the cables will land is through a conduit called horizontal directional drilling, HDD, sometimes called directional drilling. And if anybody's familiar with an artesian well and how those go in, it's pretty much the same thing, except it's horizontal rather than vertical. The design is still being tweaked. This is our concept design that we'll talk about today. And we had a couple of key rules as we began the design process. Number one was to stay within paved areas on the parking lot, do nothing on the beach. We had a very similar role. By the way, Stantec worked with Avangrid on both Vineyard Wind 1 and Park City Wind. So we've been with this client for about 5 years. And rule number one was to stay on the paving. Rule number two, to the extent practicable, was to maintain beach access year round if we could. So with the concepts we're going to talk about this evening, bit of a phased approach, we'll show you what we're able to do with that. What basically happens is these large subsea cables will land on Dowses Beach. They'll end up in something called the joint bay, which are the vertical rectangles that you see there in the image, 2 on the right-hand side, 1 in the middle of the Dowses Beach parking lot. And what happens there is that these subsea cables will end up splicing with onshore cables. The onshore cables are very different. They're essentially 1/3 of this. So each of the onshore cables that will go through the streets of town will look like that, as you can see in that top image on the screen there. Again, all infrastructures on the paved road, the work will take place in the off season. And you've seen this locally with the Vineyard Wind 1 project, the experiences with Couples Beach and the Duck Bank. We'll continue to work with the town of Barnstable to ensure that we're complying with their requirements, particularly as it relates to restoration. And at the end of the day, things will be in a like new or new condition, as you can see in the image below. That's a shot of Couples Beach. And as you probably know, the Couples Beach directional drilling took place last winter. It was a little bit different. There was 2 landings instead of 3 because that was 800 megawatts. This one's 1,200 megawatts. But as you can see, we left the town with a newly paved surface. And if you look carefully, you'll see a couple of squares there in the foreground. What those actually are vaults, hatches, if you will, that are associated with those splice bays. So. Okay. So this is an overview of Dowses Beach with the landfall. Again, it's this cable that will land. We've got two joint bays that will be located, two landing points to the northern quadrant of the beach parking lot, and then a single landing point not far from the beach house. And what you see below, we'll talk about in a second, is a cross section of what the horizontal directional drill looks like. Now, effectively, what it is it's a conduit through which this cable will be routed. It's made of material called high-density polyethylene. It's a plastic. It's about 32 inches in diameter, about 4.5 to 5 inches thick. And the sole purpose of the directional drilling is essentially to install that conduit, so later on, the team can go in and actually physically pull this cable through that conduit. This is a detail of what directional drilling looks like. What you're looking at here, the image at the top is a plan view looking down on the installation. And the image at the bottom is the profile view looking sideways. The total length of the directional drill is about 1,200 feet in total. And again, it's the process that will take place is the first thing that will occur is that at the far left, you could see that there's about a 12-degree angle where the drill will make its entry point. So the first thing that happens is that the construction team will come in with a steel casing that's much larger than the hole will be. And the purpose of the steel casing is to essentially guide the drilling process. And very similar to drilling a big hole in a piece of wood, where you start by drilling the pilot hole and then progressively use larger and larger bits, directional drilling works pretty much the same. At the very beginning, after the steel casing is installed, by the way, that casing is just temporary, it's just a construction tool, if you will. They will go in and they will bore about a 6 or 7 or 8 inch pilot hole that will go this entire route along this profile that you see, come down at an angle of about somewhere between 12 and 16 degrees. It'll end up going horizontally for quite a way, and then it will angle up and then punching out into the seabed. And at the seabed, that's where this cable, which by then will have been routed approximately 35 miles from the southern shores of Martha's Vineyard, will actually enter through the conduit and make its beach landing. So again, the process will be to drill a pilot hole, 8 or 9 inches in diameter, and then progressively they will add larger bits to the drilling machine. So you'll step it up to a 12-inch bit, make the run. You'll step it up to a 16-inch bit, make the run. And then finally, to land or pull through a conduit that's about 32 inches in diameter, the hole will be slightly large to facilitate the process. So that's in a nutshell how directional drilling ends up working. And this is a very similar configuration, actually identical configuration to what's going on at Cobbles Beach last winter, and is also slated for Park City Wind. The directional drilling over at Cobbles was a little bit shorter, it's about 1,300, 1,400 feet, where this one's about 2,200. This is a tried and true technology. It's been around for quite a while. It's actually very highly sophisticated in the sense that the drilling process is guided by a GPS type system.
Hey, Ken, before you go on, can you just talk about the depth of underneath the beach?
Absolutely. The depth under the, as you can see, let me just, okay. Yeah. So the key to the directional drilling is to try to dive down quickly. And it's done for two reasons. One is to try to get the cable as deep as possible, as quickly as possible. And second is to build stability of the hole. So at the end of the day, where folks will be sitting actually on the beach itself, there'll be somewhere between 35 and 50 foot of cover between the sand on the beach, if you will, and the cable. So again, a lot of details are currently being worked out. There's been the design has not been finalized by any extent. There's no contractor on board. But conceptually, this is what the construction staging might look like. As you'll notice, there's a variety of skids and various components that go along with the directional drilling. Everything you see on this image is just temporary. These are just the tools to actually make the directional drill. And as you can see, we've established a work zone that is fairly, we tried to make this confined as we could. The image at the right, you'll see a construction work zone. And that would be the construction fencing to which the construction crews, the parking, the trucks, the trailers, and everything will remain. We've established a vehicle access route on the outside, the outboard side of that fence, as you can see, to try to work to make the northern portions of the Dowses Beach parking lot available to the public during construction. Certainly, there'll need to be some coordination on traffic. There will be trucks that will need to come in and out of this area during construction. But we have tried to maintain that methodology. Looking at the northern part of the parking lot, it'll be a different construction fencing area. As you can see, it's basically the northern half of the parking lot will be dedicated to the construction operation, the parking, the truck traffic, the material laydown, but we would maintain the southern portion for the general public to still access the beach year round. And again, the construction of the HDD would be in the off-season months, not impacting vacation time.
How long does it take?
Excuse me?
How long does the construction take?
The construction is construction will take probably between 2 to 3 months. Let me break it down. With this phased approach, it would take 2 to 3 months over 2 construction seasons, basically the winter. It would take 2 winters to put this together as we've outlined here. Again, we've not coordinated back with the town just yet. There's a lot of details to work out. We do have the option of utilizing more equipment and work to do multiple drills at the same time. That can be done, and very likely that would mean that we could get all the work done in one construction season, 3 to 4 months over one winter. But what that would very likely mean is closing the beach parking lot during that time. We would very likely lose the opportunity to have the beach accessible during the winter months while that construction is going on. Here are some photographs. There were some poster boards out front. This is the casing pipe that I had mentioned, that temporary seal pipe that gets put in to guide the drilling process. This, of course, was Dowses Beach toward the beginning of the construction sequence. This is the casing pipe as it's being installed. You can see it's being placed at a 12 to 16 degree angle. And again, it does get removed in the end. And the finished product. I don't know the exact dates, but I believe the directional drilling on Kimball started sometime in mid-December or so. And I think by the end of February, the physical drilling work was completed, and then the parking lot was repaved in time for the summer season. Okay, so we land the 3 subsea cables, we go to joint bays, and we go down to smaller cables. The cables, the individual smaller cables, you can see the photograph up there, will then run right up to the point of interconnection of something called the duct bank. It's like a big concrete box. And very similar to the way we had the directional drill ended up placing a 32-inch conduit. What we have in a duct bank is a series of 8-inch conduits that will contain each of the individual cables. And what we've done in this design is to basically have one conduit for each one of the power cables, and then for each circuit, one spare rather. And for that reason, we have 12 conduit in the duct bank. And so this is typically of what it will entail. Place HDPE, high density polyethylene conduit, pour concrete around it, put thermal backflow on top of it, and then pave over that. We had an added challenge that we're in the process of addressing with this route, which is going to go up Dowses Beach Road, and then we'll interface with East Bay Road. And that's the box culvert on Dowses Beach Road itself. So we really studied this in collaboration with the town. We contacted the company that originally designed and did the construction work. And we've conceptualized on a concept here that will allow our 3x4 duct bank, as we call it, 3 wide by 4 tall, to basically transfer to a 1x12. Instead of having the conduits stacked up on top of each other, we would just lay them flat, get over the box culvert, and then transition back to our 3x4 duct bank. Okay, Pat, next.
So I'll be brief so we can get to questions. So just a couple last slides. So this is an overview of the permitting process that we're going to go through for Commonwealth Wind. Similar to those who have seen the question and answer doc that we sent to the OVA in June. We listed these permits as we committed to. Once these are filed and posted online, we'll share these with the OVA board and share all these filings and permits with members of the Osterville community. But this just gives you a list. Most all of these have some type of public input process, particularly the Cape Cod Commission, Development of Regional Impact Review. We're going to go through the Barnstable Conservation Commission, and several of the state processes as well have extensive engagement opportunities. So this just gives you an idea of what we're looking at for that process. In terms of what's to come, so as you've heard tonight, we're preparing sort of the final stages of our permit applications, our state permit applications for this project. And that's particularly going to be our filing to the Energy Facilities Siting Board, and then our environmental notification form to the state's Mass Environmental Policy Agency office. So once we file those, we will share them. We are also going to do a series of open house events probably in October, November, once those permits are filed, where we can give similar presentations with more detail. Hopefully here at the library, if Cindy and the team here will have us. And we will be similar to some open houses that we did earlier this spring. We'll be having similar forums like this. And as many times as the OVA would like to have us, we'll be back here as well with you. And we're available, particularly myself and my colleague Rachel, for one-on-one meetings. Anybody wants to go down to Dowses Beach with us and talk things through conceptually or ask questions, we'll meet you anywhere here in the village and have conversations in one-on-one, small groups, whatever you'd like. And just to close, I think the other thing we, originally when we set this meeting up with John Crow and the OVA board was to also talk about potential opportunities for localized benefits or village-specific benefits that could be part of this project. As you heard from Ken Kimmell, the benefits to the town are the potential if we go the route of a host community agreement and go a similar route to the other two projects. Those were $16 million per project plus full commercial property taxes, plus paying, because we've done the sewer collaboration with those projects for a lot of the pre-survey, pre-engineering, pre-design. We paid for a lot of that, paid for a lot of the road construction, the road resealing. And then we've also paid for, as Ken alluded to, the COMM water line replacement for your water district. So the benefits to taxpayers, both to your town taxes and to COMM taxes, are significant. And especially, we view the projects and our partnerships in the town as a significant part of the town being able to stave off more drastic property tax increases for its wastewater planning thus far. In terms of more localized village-specific benefits, these are some things we've heard about as I've had one-on-one meetings here in the village and heard about things that are key to folks here. We've heard obviously about the rec building and that site, that renovation, now called the James Crocker Junior Park area, and the further development of that site, repurposing or future use of the rec building once it's taken down. We've heard about the possibility of the bathhouse being replaced. That's what we did for Vineyard Wind at Dowses Beach. We're replacing that and rebuilding a new bathhouse. That's something we could do for this project. We've heard a lot about need for sidewalks on East Bay, both from Main Street down to the beach and then from Wayano down to the beach, so that there's easier, safer pedestrian access, especially in the summer, but really year round. Heard about the East Bay fishing piers off of East Bay Road, potential for improvements there for the local recreational fishing community. And we've heard about unfunded projects at Joshua's Pond, a little farther away from obviously Dowses Beach, but something that the town residents are looking for us to help fund, we'd be open to that. So what we really want to ask is, of these projects, especially if you have thoughts tonight, what could be of value, what could be of interest among some of these options, and what else is not on the list that you might think would be compelling and worthwhile. So I think that is it. This is my contact information. I have my business cards up here. My name is Pat Johnson, and I think we'll turn it back to you, Pete, for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. I'm going to open up for questions now. Attorney Charles Sabbath is going to be a moderator, and feel free to ask questions. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I'd like to know when this all started. It seems like you're pretty far along. And I'm really curious and want a straight yes or no answer. Is this a done deal?
It's not a done deal. We have to apply for and receive all of these permits.
Everything you're saying, you're coming across like this is already done. This has been in the works for years. And we're just here as kind of, ornaments on a tree that doesn't seem to have really any say about any of this. You've got it planned.
We have a plan. We've been meeting with the Osterville Village Association since March, when all we had was a concept. So, and we've been sharing as we've developed more information on it, all the information we have. That's part of the reason we wanted to come tonight, was to share more of the details, so you could
So
see.
what would prevent you, I'm not done with my question, what would prevent you from continuing with this? And by the way, what happened to save the sound, that all of this we were gonna keep out of our sound?
So first of all, I do want to emphasize that list of permits that Pat showed is really important. Those are all the permits that we have to get from all different state, federal. We haven't even talked about the federal. The federal government also has to bless this project. So it's not, we don't get to dictate all of this. These are permits that government entities, including your town, has to issue. You have the right to be heard at all of those times and give your input. In our mind, we have a good project and a good plan, but that's in our mind. We still have to convince all of these regulators and go through a very extensive permitting process for the next several years in order for this project to go forward.
So you're saying if all of these permits are approved, this project would start in several years, regardless of how the town feels about this?
No, I wouldn't say regardless. If the town is dead set against it and denies all the permits that we need, that would be an issue we'd have to address. There is, as Mark Els did, I think, try to explain a month ago, there's a process that the state has to issue permits that override local control. That is not something that we're interested in doing. We're interested in working with the community and getting to yes. But at the end of the day, we have to get all these permits or we don't have the right to build the project.
My understanding was Mark was also though already negotiating in terms of the pricing that would benefit us. How do we negotiate that pricing prior to any of these permits?
Wait, we haven't negotiated with Mark Els about this project at all.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I attended last month's meeting and I'm not an anti-environment, green energy, anti-sewering or anything. What I am against is your plan to come into this incredibly environmentally fragile and beautiful and unique environment that means so much to many of the people in this room and many people who live in Barnstable and rip it up. I just can't imagine thinking that going across that causeway with industrial equipment is a sound idea. It is not. The wildlife on both sides of that causeway and both of those waters is abundant, and it just breaks my heart to think that you think, I didn't hear one word about environmentalism here. And it breaks my heart to think that you just come in and say, oh, Dowses Beach, perfect. Well, a couple of years ago, you said Dowses Beach was not suitable. What's changed? My other question is this. Why didn't you guys plan for an offshore hub to connect all these lines? When you look at the leases, south of Martha's Vineyard, they're stacked up like pancakes. And they're all going to have wind farms, and they should all be hooked up to an offshore hub instead of these constant lines coming in and ripping up our beaches. Anyway, here's my last thought. The last thing I'll say tonight, I think you're going to run into a buzzsaw on this one. I'm the least of the people in this room. And what I'll say is I will fight individually. I will join any group wanting to fight this. I'm thinking of starting one myself calling Save Our Beach, SOB. And it's the wrong place to do this. It's the wrong place to do this. I say, try to find another place.
And the vice president just reminded me, can we have, and when you ask a question, can we have your name? You can look your name.
Sure, my name is Suzanne Conley. I live here in the Osterville Woods section of the village.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't want to get into an argument with you, so but what I will say is this, that is a beautiful beach. It's a beautiful, fragile resource. And when we do the construction that we're talking about, we are going to be required, and we would anyway, do everything we can to protect it. And that is Kimball Beach, right after we got done with the construction.
Kimball
We don't
Beach is
care.
not Dowses Beach.
But the point is that construction work that we did there can be done the same way at Dowses Beach, and Dowses Beach will look just as good as this beach when we're done.
It looks fine right now.
Would you be able to tell us, what permitting avenues you will have to pursue in terms of environmental approval for your, for bringing the cable on shore at Dowses Beach? Would
Sure.
that be of interest to you? So if
Absolutely.
you could tell us that, that might help with this question.
Sure.
Can you tell me your name, please? You just asked the question.
My name's Chuck Sabat. I think he introduced me before.
Yeah, there's many. The local permits that we need are the local conservation commission. We will definitely need their review. We'll need various town permits to open the roads. We will need permission from the town to do the work on the beach. It's a town-owned beach. They're the property owner. We need their permission. Just as if, they were a landlord. I mean, you need the permission of the property owner. Then there's various state permits from Mass DEP. We need several from the Cape Cod Commission, from the Energy Facility Siting Board, and ultimately from the Bureau of Energy Management, federal government, and all of those entities have jurisdiction over different aspects of the project.
Are you required to file with the Conservation Commission in the town of Barnstable?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
John Griffin, I live up the street. Just for clarification, you mentioned it. So you come under, I forget what the phrase is, Public Utility Siting Board,
Energy Facility Siting Board.
which can override any one of these boards, correct?
Not the federal, but the states, yes,
State, right?
that's true. But I want to emphasize, our intent is not to do that.
Well, wait, so that's the question. I have to work for an organization that could use that, and we never did. So that's the question. You will not use that provision?
Our intent is to work with this community and with the
Just answer
town
question.
and others. No, that's our intent. We would like to find a way to get to yes.
I had projects, man, oh man, it was critical. Yes or no?
Yes or no, what?
Will you invoke this and ask the state to override Conservation Commission? I was on a Conservation Commission. They could overturn you in 2 minutes.
Well, actually, for that particular permit, DEP, as you're probably aware, is the agency that hears appeals from Conservation Commission. So it wouldn't be the siting board, it'd be DEP. It's a hypothetical question. It depends upon what the grounds are.
Well, I think the people want to know. They ask the question, this is a
All
big thing, but how many of these can be overridden by the state? I think most of them,
Yes,
other than the feds.
they can, not the federal permit, yes, the state ones can be.
Okay, there was a hand up in the back. Yes, sir.
Yes, John Leaper, North Bay Road. You said that from a practical point of view, this is gonna be our power. So what provision is being made if by some act of God, the power goes off? Let's say a hurricane that wipes you out, so to speak. Is there a secondary source? Because I know in Texas, we have secondary sources with coal, with natural gas, etc. But more importantly, I think your comment on reliability, given what's happened in Texas and Europe and even Black on, is it back on?
Justice,
You should know.
it's not our project.
I know, they're the only wind turbine.
I've certainly heard about them going down.
Project.
Justice may have information on
Is
that.
it back on? Block Island back on? Because there were cracks and curves, so it's in a place.
So I was in order, so I'm just not hearing the question. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Justice Ansah. I'm the Interconnections Manager at Commonwealth Wind.
Yeah,
Oh,
You want a mic?
sure.
You just have to press that button.
Okay.
So just to repeat the question, my name is Christina Hoffman. They were just asking, because I know that you were in the other room about Block Island, and they know that Block Island had been turned off because they had some issues with the turbine. So they're just looking to see if anybody knows if Block Island has been turned back on or not. So that's a very simple question to you. You might not know the answer.
Right, so I don't know the exact status of Block Island, but the ISO New England, so ISO New England is an organization that runs, that manages the power grid for all of New England. So when the power grid, for power plants like Block Island, right, if they have an issue, they have to take something called an outage. So there are some contingencies built into the system to ensure that when a wind farm like Block Island goes offline, they have a backup power provider to be able to meet all those reliability needs of the system and so be able to bring the
That's
unit.
my question.
Right.
Do we have that secondary source available? Because basically, I've just been told practically this is going to be our source.
There is a secondary source. The way that New England system is designed, right? The system can lose up to 1,200 megawatts, which is almost the size of what we are actually here to discuss today. The system can lose up to 1,200 megawatt and still reliably serve load, which means still be able to transmit power to your house. So Block Island is roughly 30 megawatts. So with that unit offline, right, it doesn't really affect the system. We still have enough generation on the system to be able to make sure that customers.
Much more. We're talking about 2,400.
Between
Three of them.
this one is 1,200 megawatts.
Yeah, so all three of them are. If one goes down, the whole one could go down all in the same area. You get a big old hurricane through there.
Correct. I mean, if all goes down, if we get a big hurricane, most likely we might lose some power plants. And I think before ICE in New England and engineers approve any project, right? They do all this contingency analysis to, it's like what are scenarios, right? If you lose 1,200 megawatts or if you lose 2,400 megawatts, right? What does the system look like? And where can we find that backup power supply? So if they're not able to find that in their long-term plan analysis, right? They don't approve the project. So for any project to even pass all the studies and start operating, right? They would have had to do all the studies to make sure that there's enough backup to allow the project to move forward in the first place.
Yes, sir.
My name's Ron Murphy. You had mentioned the tremendous value to the town to be able to coordinate with sewer. And I am aware, of course, as everyone probably is traveling through the town, how messed up Old Strawberry Hill Road, that area has been throughout the winter. So was the conduit also placed in at that time?
Does anyone from our team know the timing of the electrical cable versus the sewer? Anyone familiar with that? I think my understanding of it is the sewer line goes first because it's lower than the electric cable. And then the electric cable goes next. That was my understanding of the sequencing.
So the road will be torn up again to put in the electrical.
No, that's the whole benefit of it is that we open the road, the sewer line goes in, the electric cable comes in, and then it's sealed and
So both of
at
them
our
is,
expense.
so both of them have been put down.
At the same, yes, at the same.
They have now.
I think so. That is the Vineyard Wind project, and I'd love to have the opportunity to get back to you in writing with the definite
Because
answer.
I had heard that was my understanding that the road had to be reopened to do the electrical, even though the sewer has been done. So that's twice that we're going to be seeing issues with that road.
Well, let me just say this, the plan here, what we're gonna do in Park City, which I know, and what we're gonna do here is the road's gonna get open, town's gonna put in sewer line, we're gonna put in electric. There may be some replacement or repair of water mains as well, because they're old. And then one opening and one closing, that's the plan.
So is the village of Osterville scheduled for sewerage through Main Street at this particular time?
It's on the town's, as we understand it, it's on the town's plan, but it's not the next project they're planning. It's something I've heard 5 to 10 years away. And so what we understand from Mark Elz's presentation here last month is that if we decided to do the electric line, the town would accelerate the sewer line through Osterville to align with our schedule.
How many years ago?
Okay, a question in the back.
Okay, okay. So, couple of questions. So first, what's the voltage on this line? Working for? I mean.
The voltage, Justice, we're gonna figure with it.
Okay,
What's the voltage on the line?
so there are going to be, the main lines from the onshore substation to West Barnstable will be 345 kV. And on the New England system, right, 345 kilovolts is the largest power rating cables we have on the system. And usually those are meant for, when you're planning a project on a 345 kV system, it shows that the system is very robust, it's very reliable, and also ensures that we're able to get power from the source of generation to the customers. So the lines that are coming into West Boston will be 345 kV. And everything else around that area is 115 kV lines.
Everything around what area?
Yeah, around the West.
Outside of the substation. Grid, 15.
So there are a couple of 345 kV lines in that area. So right now, the Bourne substation, right, is mostly 115 kV. There is a plan to rebuild that substation to a 345 kV to better to allow power to be exported in and out of Cape Cod, which means that we're able to get power to the customers reliably, to reduce the risk of outages. And then so that 345 kV line out of West Barnstable is connects to Bourne, and then that also connects to Carver. So in addition to being able to serve Cape Cod reliably, we're also able to get power to the rest of Massachusetts.
And is that upgraded that substation in this funding for this project?
The substation will be upgraded as part of this project, right? And I just one note, one last point I would like to make is West Barnstable is a very robust station, and there are other substations on the system where we could have gone to, but then given the location of West Barnstable, right? Interconnecting there, obviously we have to do some system upgrades. But then if we were to compare it to say Canal, which is a little inland, that would have required a lot more significant system upgrades, which means it will be more disruption to the residents, will be more expensive, and also have much more environmental impact. Only because Canal right now has about 3 operating units in that area. So injecting another 1,200 megawatts to that location will cause significant issues. And it's a little further inland, so also bringing the cable all the way to Canal means we need longer cables. The longer the cable, which means we have to open up more roads and cause a lot of disruption. So that is what makes West Barnstable very strategically a great point of interconnection.
Really great thing. So one is, been around a long time. I've rarely seen, I've never seen, I've been a lot of heavy highway and offshore construction. I've never seen a commercial project sit with a government project. The concept is great. We're going to take the street out, and the sewer line's going to get in first. 2 or 3 months of that schedule.
The lady in the back in the green raincoat.
So my question is, how long will it take for this whole project to disruption from starting to end?
Okay, I had a little trouble hearing your question, but I think would you mind repeating it just a little louder so everyone can hear it?
Talked about 2 winters, or you could do it in 3 to 4 months in 1 winter. But now we're talking about roads getting dug up, and that's only hard. So like I said before, I feel like it's a big deal. So my question is, how long from start to finish, we're talking about the second part?
So I don't know if Erin or Todd's in there. Our intent, our hope would be to follow the Vineyard Wind model of 2 off seasons. Vineyard Wind did its full off season last winter, starting, I think the sewer work started in September, October of 2021, and then both the sewer work and the electric cable work wrapped in this past May before Memorial Day. The hope would be able to do it in two of those off-season type cycles, September to May, 2 straight years. But it's possible that, we haven't finalized that yet. We're so early in this process. The hope would be in 2 off seasons. It could be 3.
September's not an off season.
Of course. No, yeah.
Did I cut you off? Yeah. We didn't know what.
Yeah.
No, stand up and finish.
Okay. So, 2 other things. So one is, I realize you guys manage a bunch of projects, go on experience in this, in Park City and this project are both 100% owned by you.
Yes.
I mean, your organization. So, and they probably have different capital structures, different investment structures, and different investment companies. But to me, running this cable where Park City right down the same road as that makes a really compelling argument, not only from a cost perspective, but from a time perspective, from a investment perspective. Is there any technical reason why you can't run those, and what would that be?
So we looked at that very carefully because if we could have landed at Craigville Beach, all the lines for Park City and Commonwealth and put them all in a street, we would have done it. There are technical reasons why we can't. Do you want to, Ken, do you want to address that or?
It would have been Duck Bank, Park City, Duck Bank, Commonwealth Wind, with a sewer upgrade in the middle. And truthfully, it would have turned, I hate to use this word, but it would have turned that street into a war zone. I mean, the width of the construction that would have been needed for all that infrastructure, these roads are only 20 feet wide. It would have, very likely have impacted not just the sidewalk, but even the right of way. So it was concluded that from a overall impact during construction, that option was put aside.
Don't you think that's significantly less disruptive to the community and the environment, and everything about 2 complete systems to get the same area of what possible?
Well, I think
I think that's really important. The last thing I was going to say was, I don't know what's going on. Just making all the boxes. It seems to me that what I've heard, and I'm so late to the game here, is that the town manager is saying, I'm getting a second hand, that you can't discuss any discussions with you, which you say you haven't had yet. And I said, you don't need to, right? But, everything, the 2 people are negotiating agreement, both of them don't have to be quiet about it, right? So I would suggest that you guys be very proactive with the stage of the discussion. And I would also say that I would not recommend that any entity, whether it's this great group here, provide any approval unless the engineering is completely done.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think we should be working on a concept like we're going to be doing this. And I appreciate the work you guys have done, but I was working really hard at running everything up and down.
Can I just want to respond to one point. What we favored giving information on a timely basis, even if the design isn't all done, because in fairness, we haven't presented any design to this community. So this is an opportunity that these documents are not done. They're not going to be permitted until all of that engineering work is done. So we have quite a ways to go.
And I should just say, sir, and everybody, these renderings here are just to show you the correct ones. Mark Ellis is not seeing these.
Yeah.
No town council. You are the first people in the town of Barnstable seeing these renderings. We've not shared this because we haven't started an HCA negotiation. We haven't shared any of this with anybody from the town. You're seeing it first. And once we start an HCA negotiation, we'll share this with them and start having a conversation. But you're seeing it first.
This gentleman down here in front.
Hi, thank you. My name is Bart Schneider. I'm somewhat afraid that some of the comments are a result of what the town manager said last time. And this gentleman has obviously been involved in contract negotiations in the past, what I do for a living and have. But it's impossible for parties to not discuss issues of mutual concern until you get to the point where you are negotiating the host agreement. I mean, you have to talk ahead to know what's going on. As you said, he hasn't even seen these. But obviously there has to be a substantial amount of discussion first before you really even move forward. secondly, the other thing that I think was, and I don't think he was meaning to state it by any means, but he did make a comment that was referenced, that he said that, the permitting, they can just go forward. Basically, that was said about the permitting. You can file the permits, but as I indicated, everybody here has input. Lawyers, and I hate to use the term, certainly have a right to file injunctive relief to prevent things from going forward. This company has not said they're, going forward come hell or high water. They've offered to talk about it. Talking to Z, as I have a number of times, the water is why many of us live here. We talk about the environmental aspects of this. We need to protect it. The flip side of that, and Z alluded to this, and I think it's very true, with other things that I do, is that we're gonna have a lot of dead water here unless we do something about sewers. So making sewers a part of this project, assuming we protect the environment around it, I think is a crucial way to move up what was a 15-year plan to a 5-year plan. Your comment, ma'am, at the beginning about it looks like this is a done deal. It's unfortunately the nature of this type of project. A company approaches, the federal government, they purchase rights to something. So yeah, it has moved forward, but it's not a done deal. And everybody in here certainly has a right to have, input into that process. Could you put up I would like to put up the slide that has the two routes. Sure. If you would for a minute.
I got it for tomorrow.
Oh, okay, that's great, super. I like the colors with my bad eyes and worse here. So, okay, right. Just past it. Now, you're saying you put both of them up there, and you're saying the preferred is the Osterville Barnstable Road. When's the last time the three of you on a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock tried to ride up that road? And when you take a look at and I realize you're talking off season, in season. I've lived here long enough now that I've learned to not like the season. But how wide is that road? How wide is Five Corners Road?
Mark, do you know the width off the top of your head?
Ballpark?
They're at least 24 feet wide, correct?
Okay, yeah. So for the period of time that you're going to be doing the construction, I'm not going to say it's going to be impassable, but if I were a homeowner on Osterville, Barnstable Road, or on Old Mill and Five Corners, and I'm not saying nice things because we have a lot of business people or own something on Main Street, at a certain point, I would not be looking for a beach house. I'd be looking for some type of compensation for the loss of use of your property at a certain point in time. Eminent domain is permanent, but people that are sitting at this table here and people in the community are going to lose the use of their property for a certain period of time. On the sewers, and when you've done these projects before, have you just replaced the sewers where your lines are going in? I mean, I
Just
realize
replace
that's
the
a
sewers?
gift. Yeah. Have you done sewers in other areas?
Well, there may be other projects in other parts of the country where we put a sewer line in and an electric line at the same
Correct.
time, maybe.
Correct.
The project that we're doing this now is the Vineyard Wind 1 project. That is our example.
And have your other projects had deadlines with penalties? To the great comment from the gentleman in the back about trying to sync sewer and cable.
Well, it's not sewer and cable,
No.
it's government.
Government, right. I chuckle because I can't believe, because you can do, let's say, 200 feet a day. I guarantee you sewer is not going to be laid 200 feet a day. So 30 to 40. So difficult project. Everybody here has to get involved in the permitting process. I would suggest you this is going to get done, but this community, and I mean Osterville, not Barnstable. I've learned also there's an Osterville, there's an Osterville tax, there's an Osterville everything since I've moved here. I've seen, but we need to stay on top of it to make sure that the stakeholders who are impacted negatively, if it goes forward, and I'm not dismissing by any means the need for sewers, gets taken care of. One last thing, if I might, if you're going to put up the parking lot with the 3 lines.
The Cobbles Beach.
Yeah. Okay, we can go back up one more. There was one more detailed one where you showed the lines coming in.
That one?
No, back up. This is just, my dog will have a heart attack when you have those.
Sorry, I think we're going the wrong direction.
Okay.
You want a more local?
Yeah, I want the one where you had where the equipment's going to be parked.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's coming up.
Okay. There you go.
That's.
My
half of it.
dog will have a heart attack trying to get up there. And first of all, the only thing that scares me more than looking at this is the piping plovers are not gonna be happy with it.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is, if you take a look at this right now, with those units there, I assume you're not gonna I wouldn't either, by the way, take those units out, during the summer months, they're gonna sit there, I assume idle, am I correct?
We're not gonna be working on the beach during the summer, and we have to obey piping plover time.
Oh, no, I know, but with the units and I realize this is nothing more than a schematic. Would that all be removed in the season?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be the entire
Correct.
time, because that covers the main entrance to the, obviously.
No, that equipment will go in the winter months, it will do its thing, and then it will be out by the summertime.
Okay, I think that's important.
So
That's
It's not gonna just sit there.
no fences, no nothing, it's all like,
Right.
it never existed.
Correct, except for those little manhole things that Kent showed, which are above ground, you will see nothing. It will look very much like Couples Beach did in May when we were done with the work.
And one last question for you, and that's, I think at the meeting 2 months ago, I think someone said, do we get cheaper energy? And your comment was, talk to?
No, well, there's two answers. One is overall, this project is estimated to save ratepayers in Massachusetts about $1 billion.
In where? Osterville?
Ratepayers. in
Oh,
Massachusetts.
okay, I did check. No more questions, you're.
No, but that includes you. That includes you.
Yeah.
And second, we are in discussions with a Cape entity about a power purchase agreement specifically for Cape Cod.
I just think Osterville needs to be real active to take care of it.
When town manager Mark, I'm Bill Custis, I was director here for a number of years, back in 2004. And when Mark was here, he made us a lot very uncomfortable because he mentioned that when he had become the opportunity to represent the town in the post agreement, that when he sat at the table with you good people, he was on a very unequal playing field. And he must have said this 8 times. We all felt the same thing. I have a tough job because they hold eminent domain and I don't. And that is a question that was partly answered. But one thing that I came here, as a matter of fact, I talked to a fellow professional in the federal government this past week. And could you get into the aspect of when you, why he feels so uncomfortable that he has to kind of sweet talk you? And he can't demand anything. Can you kind of,
All right, first of all, my view of the host community agreements isn't that Mark sweet talked us. I think he's a very hard negotiator and he got very good deals for the town. So I don't think.
So you don't feel that you use the power eminent domain in order to get your point relative down?
That's not how we do business. We're trying to, honestly, we're trying to come up with a package of benefits that makes this a compelling project for the town and for Osterville. And that is how we want to do business. And that's what we've done for the other 2 projects. It hasn't been done with bullying or threats or anything like that. It's been done with give and take. And that's the process we'd like to follow here.
Sure.
Yes, I'm Joe Lopez from Ill River Road, and I've heard a couple of things. One of the nuances that's so wonderful about Osterville, when we talk about plovers, is the way that dune is shaped. If you look at this dune, that's no bueno. You have sand dunes that have been shaped for hundreds of years from storms, and I think it's very important that you take the approach as planners, that this is a very important part of a contract that may come about. And the responsibility of having it, thinking from that perspective, if you're talking about things like eminent domain, and, you're kind of over the barrel and you've got to do it, I recommend that you take a 2-pronged approach and be very thoughtful of the benefits that can accrue to the town and the nuance in terms of construction, so that you don't have a flat slab after it's done. You maintain the dunes, you maintain the causeway, we work around those things. And that way the permitting process, when it goes through, can be such that it benefits the town, it recognizes the environment, but also possibly provides, the septic is very bad in many areas. We go to Seaview Avenue as one area that if we are concerned about the water and the quality of the fish and the integrity of the nature and the dunes, that's an environmental thing that I would urge you guys to really put their feet to the fire on that. They're gonna offer the world, and I think that you have to be very thoughtful about the way you go about it, and that's all I say respectfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Zenas Crawford, or Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. So I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. Human health, these power lines, if it were going by my house, I'd want to understand that. I want to understand how we could possibly reimburse the community, the downtown shop owners in particular, for the disruption. It's going to be real disruption, we all know that. I have a few other questions, but at large, just like Bart just did, I want to address Lee's concerns about environment. I grew up here like many people did. I see a lot of people who've grown up here as well like me. You know, the water off of Seaview Ave used to be crystal clear. It's not. Why is it not? It's not because we're polluting everything around here. It's all of us. The groundwater is supercharged with nitrogen. How big? I just did a test over in Oyster Harbors for the golf course wells that they water the golf course. About 5 milligrams. 1960, the background level was 0.3. All of us, going up dramatically. And the Bay Street, that number is 11 to 13. We're growing algae like you can't believe. The color of the water is the brown behind this lady's head. We're going to kill everything in the water if we don't fix it. So I'm not saying I'm 1,000% on board for how this project is going to work, but I am saying, let's not look a gift horse in the mouth, but let's get the best possible deal we can. And if we can accelerate soaring in this area by 15 years, maybe 20, it's huge. About a third of the wastewater we're trying to get rid of in Osterville transits downtown Osterville. It's this area. It's the commercial properties. It is the condominium developments that are around here. We are just loading the area with wastewater that's going directly into the water, that's polluting this area tremendously. We have to stop that. And I don't belittle the opportunity to actually do something to clean the air. I was very vocal. My organization was very vocal against Save Our Sound. I didn't want to see windmills out here and blinking lights at all. The math is different. The turbines are much bigger. They're much more efficient. I think there are real concerns that we need to address. But if we can do this, and if we can get infrastructure and upgrade it, and I'm reminded just today, and we all should be reminded today, right? Something happened in the voting booth, right? What happened? The safe broke. The safe broke. Where was it from? The water lines here from the 1930s. I bet you that safe is from the 1930s too. The handle broke right off. So to me, that's just another, thing in this community. If you're not taking care of your house, if you're not taking care of your property with salt water, with the issues, it's time to upgrade. And you know what? We're not taking care of our house. We need to take care of our house. So tell me about the power lines and human health. Can we help the shopkeepers along Main Street? What else can be done? Could we upgrade the community and get some charging stations? Mark might mention downtown. Can we actually get some green stuff for Osterville, not just green dollars, but couldn't this be a showcase for what a community could look like on Cape Cod? How great would that be? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you want to cover the community benefits?
Sure.
And then we'll come back and hit the EMF issue.
Okay, yeah, so I think that's a great point, Z. We're very interested in, some of these opportunities, but that could include charging stations. Ken and I both drive electric vehicles and come to Osterville a lot. And yeah, we see it, that there's really nowhere except Barnstable High School is the closest charging station to right where we're sitting right now. There's none at Centerville or Osterville. So obviously there's a need there. We're interested in your feedback on this. And in terms of, offsetting funds or mitigation funds to businesses, that's a conversation we're willing to have. We talked a little about that with folks from the OBPA. There are business owners here tonight. We're willing to talk to business owners about those impacts and hear how their business operates, particularly in the winter months. We're willing to sit down and have those conversations, absolutely. So, and I'm
Power line,
scheduling
that's a lot of power. People worry, I would worry if I were underneath a huge power
Yep.
line. We've all read about that.
So,
So how are these cables gonna be different?
yes.
Because they're in the ground, underground.
Yeah, let's ask the gentleman to come up, but you just cited the most important thing. These are buried well below the ground. So this whole EMF thing is a different story than.
What about the causeway?
But go ahead, Causeway too, it'll be buried.
Right, so similar to Park City Wing, the cables that come to the West Barnstable substation will be all buried underground. So from our onshore substation to West Barnstable, right, none of those cables will be in view at all. The only other lines that we will have to upgrade as a result of this project, right, will be from existing power lines. So we're not building, I mean, there is a new connection between West Barnstable and Bourne. It's a 115 kV line that is being operated to a higher capacity. But then from the beach cables that go out underneath, I mean, from the onshore substation to West Barnstable substation, everything will be buried underground. So there's not going to be any lines in view at all.
So and I can add a little bit more to that. Also, my team is responsible for all different types of analysis to the built in natural environment. You saw the list of permits. Some of those permits deal specifically just with natural resources, like mostly at DEP, and the Energy Facility Siting Board and the MEPA process, which are really the first two in the most sort of overarching processes, deal with all different types of impacts to the built in natural environment during construction. So it's dust, it's noise, it's air emissions from the equipment. So we have to address all of those. We have to show that we meet all the state standards that are established for those. And then moving on to operations, one of the more typical concerns or health concerns is the potential for effect from electric and magnetic fields. So the underground cables only put off electric fields. I'm sorry, excuse me, only magnetic fields. Thank you. They do not put off electric fields. Thank you. And typically the design having them buried. So there are World Health Organization and other standards. These lines will be modeled. Our Energy Facility Siting Board, they're the agency or the state agency that really takes up that issue to ensure that the project is designed and operated such that it is well below any documented or known levels that could cause any effect to public health. And so that's one of the key components of our Siting Board filing, is to show the analysis, show what the potential effects for EMF are, and just not to oversimplify, because I don't actually do those analyses, but members of my team do. Typically for underground cables, magnetic field spikes right over the center and dips off immediately. And again, when you bury them, the depths that are proposed here, it really is no perceptible magnetic field at the surface that's anywhere near any known potential health effects for exposure.
I think you should make some papers available.
We do have them, and we are happy to make them available.
Yeah, Mark Curley, I'm gonna go to this lady in the green.
Mark Curley, I have many questions, but on the Barnstable Clean Water Board as well, so I'm obviously at the subject end of things and environmental and things. At an earlier meeting, you guys mentioned that when the power lines come ashore between Dowses and West Barnstable substation, there'll be need for a 10-acre parcel for an additional onshore substation, which you've mentioned several times. I don't think too many people caught that or know about that. Instead, it won't be in Osterville, but you're buying land or land under contract for that. So could you just explain what that need is and how that works? And then the other thing I noticed is you changed from one proposed route going from Dowses up Anagrid. Was it to double red lines? Could you just explain what that change was?
Oh, yeah, and let me answer the first part, and then I'll turn it over to you guys to talk about the substation. I should have said this. If we go up the Main Street route, I think there's two options. There's East Bay Road to Main Street. There's Wiano Avenue to Main Street. We haven't attempted to just say which one is better. That's something that we'd like community input for. So that's what that dotted line means.
Okay, just notice that change. I don't want to stop it. That was
Yeah, so Justice, maybe you can explain why we need a substation. I am going to say that we haven't presented that part of the project yet because we're still negotiating the land.
While you're explaining that, it's 35 miles from the windmill farm. to the beach, I would assume you'd need a substation above water between there, right? So you'd also add that.
Correct. I think that's a very good question. And then I wish we had some slides to show the group. And that is something we can provide later on. So basically picture the wind farms in the middle of the ocean, right? And the power grid, there's something called synchronization, right? So in North America, we have like the 60 hertz, the frequency, right? Basically. So the power grid, as we know it, operates at a certain frequency. But in the wind farms, because they spin, but they don't spin fast enough to match that frequency that we're used to on the power grid. So the power that is generated in the ocean is at one frequency that is below what we have on the grid. Now, to be able to get the power from the offshore side to the onshore side, right? It has to go through some conversion to make sure that everything is in sync. So once the power hits onshore, it's able to go to the substation, and then from the substation, it goes to the customers. So once the wind turbine generated power, they go through, we have a substation in the middle of the ocean itself. So that we call that an electric service platform. So picture like say maybe 20 wind farms, 20 wind turbines. So they all generate power, and then we have all the small lines connecting all 20 of them. And then we have slightly bigger lines, right? That step up from that very low power output level to say medium voltage level. And then that is what goes to the substation that is sitting in the middle of the ocean. So from that substation that is in the ocean, right, we have a long cable, like a conductor, right? So we have a long cable from the offshore substation that is at one voltage level that brings the power from the offshore all the way to onshore. So for example, what in our initial engineering design, we're looking at about 220 kilovolts. So the cable that brings the power from offshore is about 220 kilovolts. And now once that gets onshore, we step it up. So we have transformers. Everybody, I'm sure, has heard of transformers, but these are transmission transformers. So the transformer's job is to step up from 220 kV to the 340 kV that I mentioned earlier on. So the system where we are connecting the West Barnstable is at 45 kV. To be able to make sure that we can directly interconnect to West Barnstable without causing any system disruption, right? We use the transformer to then step up that voltage level to 345. And so basically, offshore wind farms produce the power. We have the offshore substation that does a little bit of conversion to a medium voltage. And then we have the cable that comes all the way from the offshore, goes underneath the parking lot that we were just showing. And then, so once that gets to our onshore substation, right, we have a transformer sitting over there that is able to step it up to the level, the voltage level that West Barnstable substation is already operating at. That way, we don't create any issues. So from the West Barnstable substation, the power is then able to go to the rest of the grid, as well as to the rest of the customers in the Cape and then in Massachusetts.
Quick question on that. Sure. You said that one I saw was 10 acres. So how big is the substation out in the ocean?
The substation is, I don't know the exact. Oh, it is floating. I mean, so it depends on, in terms of like dimensions. I don't have the exact dimensions of that.
Yeah, the pictures I've seen, it's much smaller than the land-based substation. A what?
Maybe 5 acres.
I'd hate to guess.
On the map where that might be with the circle in the middle.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it was the image.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, no, yeah, if you go back to,
Christina, you thought it showed?
So if you, even go to the photos that show the turbines, it might be our introductory slide.
Oh,
that
okay.
Actually shows some turbines. So there's often a substation that pops up in this image. I thought that I had just seen one, it might have been on a different slide. But the space needed offshore is actually less than onshore. And it's mostly because when you're onshore, you have to be able to drive to it, and there's usually some topography, you've got some stormwater that you have to manage, and so there's access roads coming out. So what's offshore is put onto a foundation that is on the ocean floor. So it's actually a smaller footprint offshore than what you need onshore.
You guys know where it would be on the map? You're planning to put the offshore one?
Yeah, we have a couple of spots identified and, yeah, we, for Commonwealth Wind,
Point it out right now. We don't know where it is.
yeah. So Commonwealth Wind is.
Christina, you want to come up and just try to point it out?
Sure. So the Commonwealth wind turbines are gonna be in that lower quadrant of the long rectangle. And so we have actually 3 different locations that are alternatives right now, and they are within that lower portion of the lease area that says Commonwealth wind in it. So
So that's where your big 10-acre or 5-acre, 3-acre offshore transformer is in that plot offshore?
yes, the offshore substation is within the Commonwealth wind area.
So it's
on
not
that
along that white line.
No,
It is not.
Thank you. That was very clarifying.
You bet.
the white line is just the undersea cable.
The lady over here in the green sweater had a question.
I have a question about, are you the people that did the horrible restoration of Craigville Beach Road?
We've heard a lot about, that.
meeting.
We've heard a lot about that. The Vineyard Wind One project did do a partial repaving of that road. We've all heard, obviously, I've driven that too, definitely a bit of a roller coaster. Definitely has also reduced speed, which is a big thing for folks in that area. But I do know that that is something that the Vineyard Wind team has heard feedback on, and I'm sure when it's fully repaved this coming winter, that it's going to be flatter.
So that's
for
what
sure.
you can expect on our roads.
I would say certainly we've heard a lot about it. I'm sure we'll learn that lesson, and if we repave, especially an interim repavement, we will not make such a roller coaster bumpy experience for motorists.
Why?
Yeah, hi, my name is Brian Dacey. I live in Little Island Drive area. Your presentation when you started was very good. She gave us this handout here, so I think you should have had a booklet showing everything that's on your presentation.
This is hard, the pamphlet, the pamphlet. Pamphlets. over
Right,
here.
I mean, there's no pamphlet on what you gave tonight.
I've got copies, Brian. I didn't bring it up for everybody, but
Yeah, you can have a copy.
Yeah, so I think that would be good. In Coble Beach, it's not Cobbles, it's my wife's, that's my wife's uncle's Coble Beach.
I thought I was saying Cobble. Am I
COB.
still saying Cobble? Because someone corrected me at the last meeting, and I vowed to fix that. I guess I haven't done it. Cobble.
Look, I've lived here for a long time. I'm a builder, I'm a developer, and as I'm driving around town in the last couple of years and seeing what's taking place, we have a lot of problems here. So, you know, this is more than you guys. It's dealing with the town. We've got water lines we gotta deal with. We have sewer lines we have to deal with. And you know, what you started to do and what you did at Cobles Beach was a terrible job. Nobody in this town is gonna say that what you guys started was a good thing. I don't know if it's on you or it's on the town. And I know that road has to settle and this, that, and the other thing, but the subcontractors you used to do that, they didn't do the right job. They didn't prep that. It was terrible. So I would think immediately, whenever you go back into Craigville Beach, nothing's gonna ever happen in Osterville if you don't prove what you can do and do right at Craigville Beach in that area. And then, you know, moving along from that, you know, thinking down the road, none of us will be here in 40 or 50 years. You know, one of my things that I look at in the village of Osterville, I mean, and I moved here from Boston in the 60s, and there were tons of kids, and Peter and I grew up, and Jimmy Crocker, who has the park, there's no kids in the village of Osterville, but certainly during the summer, there's people walking everywhere, and there's bikes and everything else. We have no bike paths. So when you start throwing out 16 million or Dowses Beach or whatever, there's gonna be a lot more than just throwing out what you throw out, as far as I'm concerned. And I think between the town and the sewer line and the water lines and whatever they do to the road, you gotta take a look at the overall picture of the width of the roads. So years ago, they did 60-foot layouts, but they did 20-foot paving. We gotta come up with 30-foot paving. So you gotta expand the roads a little bit to put a line in for bikes and joggers and walking. I mean, going into Oyster Harbors, walking anywhere in Osterville, I'm surprised people don't get killed. So that, you know, you wanna have a win-win down the road, you have to have that win-win. And to do this, you know, we gotta be convinced you know, we have a lot of power outages here. So if you're doing these grids, and you're taking care of Connecticut and everyone else, I mean, you gotta tell people in the immediate need, are we not gonna have power outages? I mean, what's gonna be better for us? I mean, cell phone service in Osterville, there's no cell towers because it's an environmental hazard. So what can you do to make cell phones better? It's a joke around it. You can't, and people are gonna use, I mean, they're gonna use cell phones, you know, what else is coming? There's gonna be a lot that's coming. So lastly, added to that, and I'll shut up, as town members and everything, you can make all kinds of promises, but my concern as a resident right now is I don't think the town's gonna finish everything that they started. I don't think they're gonna tie all these, I don't think there's gonna be enough money left to do what they gotta do. But when you guys have money and you have investors, I would say, put up some money in escrow. So when we're down the road and you do what you're gonna do, which I think is inevitable, there should be money set aside. And I mean, companies go bankrupt, the investors, things happen. We're, like this lady says, you're gonna blow up town, you're gonna blow up the roads, but how do we guarantee that it's gonna be put back the way we want it? In Osterville Beach is, you know, we'll see what happens in that particular area and all over the town of Monson. I'm ashamed riding around the town of Osterville, seeing what I'm seeing. And I don't want to see, you know, Dowses Beach become a mess and everything else. So I think I've spoken enough, but I just wanted to, you know, make sure that as people are talking about all these things, the promises of what you're talking about and different things like that, that's weak. You know, you need to have an escrow and you need to talk about real money that's a guarantee to people when you're done with the project. So that's.
Thank you for your feedback. I won't, that's all good feedback. I know my team is taking notes, so we're gonna process that. I do want you to know that part of our agreement with the town involves contractual obligations to restore and maintain, and we also have performance bonds that we,
that's key.
Yeah, so that concept is embedded.
Hi, I'm Nikki DeSoto, I live on Seaport Road. My question is in regards to the list of the permitting that you would be going through that started with the federal going all the way down to the local, you know, historic districts. Is that permitting done in, I don't know if my terminology is correct. Is it done in order or are all of those permits done at the same time, or is it's one dependent on the other, you know, in terms of who approves or how?
Yeah, that's a good question. A little bit of both. For example, that MEPA process has to be completed before most of the state agencies can issue their permits, because it's an environmental review document. And so the MEPA office has to say you've adequately studied this, and then the agencies can issue permits. The siting board goes on its own track, kind of in parallel with MEPA at the same time. Most of the other permits are dependent upon getting through the MEPA process. That is a very public process, by the way. You don't need to hire attorneys or file motions to intervene. It's a public comment period for everybody, and it's posted and quite transparent. So that's generally how that will work. And that's why we're going to start by filing the siting board petition and the MEPA certificate to get that process rolling, and the other ones will happen over time.
So really, to try to determine when you would start is very dependent on how long each of these commissions take to approve their portion of it.
Yes, except that I don't want to mislead you. We will be preparing permit applications for the other permits.
Yeah.
It's just that the agencies can't issue them until the MEPA process is complete. So it's not, we're not literally going to do nothing on any of these permits for 2 years and then start it.
No, I realize that, but some are dependent.
Some are dependent.
Others are. We have to get the approval
That's
for others
correct.
before they.
Gentleman in the back in the white shirt.
Good evening, my name is Patrick Johnson, live on Hathaway Road. I know some of your initial analysis determined Dowses Beach and Osterville were not a desirable location, not a promising site. How do we go from that to here, this now being your first choice?
Yeah, and you asked the same question. I forgot to answer it. I'm going to give a quick answer, and then I want Mark to give more complete one. We didn't say Dow's was a bad site. We said it was less preferable to Osterville Beach and to Craigville Beach. And that was true then, that's true now. Those two beaches are no longer available to us. And so Dow's is the next best one. We also didn't say, which we did for a lot of the places we looked at, that it was disqualified. We said a lot of these places were just disqualified. We didn't say Dow's was disqualified. We really just said it wasn't as good as Koval or Craigville. Now that those sites have been used, this is the next best alternative. But Mark, you probably have more you can
I
add.
mean, I'll just add that a lot more engineering work has been done on Dowses Beach as a result of looking at Craigville and Cobbles for this third project into the area. And as we looked really hard with the, from an environmental and engineering perspective on Craigville and Cobbles to see if we could land this third project at either one of those locations, and we couldn't, again, with additional engineering and environmental review at other locations essentially to the west of Craigville and Cobbles through the engineering constraints.
There was somebody in, yeah, you had a question there.
I don't know who this question is directed to.
Just have your name.
Sally Evan. I'm enthusiastic about wind power, obviously. But what I really get excited about is the sewer line. I mean, that's for me the most important thing. And I don't understand, you put it in a pipe, let's say down Main Street, and where is it going? And who's looking up to this line? And how is that being paid for?
You're asking about sewer construction?
No, I'm just asking, if you put in this wonderful big pipe in the town, where is it going? Who's paying to hook up these doors?
I believe that once it's in place, there's some obligation over a period of time for homeowners and businesses to connect to it. And then it's part of the town sewer network, and ultimately it goes to a wastewater treatment plant.
And how far do you take it? Because you.
I unfortunately, I'm not enough familiar with the network of sewer plans that the town has had to answer it. Maybe someone else is, and maybe Z is, but I don't know that answer.
It's all on the town's website. If you look at it, all the plans, it's all there. It's a 30-year plan.
Gentleman over here in the green, light green shirt.
I know some consideration.
What's your name?
Bill Silver. Wait, Bill. Some consideration is given to bringing this line through East Bay. And up maybe the boat ramp and then down East Bay Road. Could you expound upon that and why you decided not to go that route?
Sure.
I can, yeah, one of the, so we looked at about anywhere from 10 to a dozen manholes for this project. And so one of them was the McCarthy's Landing boat ramp, and so that would be.
Well, that's up the Centerville River. I was talking about straight.
The East Bay ramp, sorry, yeah, the East Bay ramp, yeah. So there's simply not enough room to actually stage and land this project there. And it also would involve open cutting up into East Bay. You can't, it's a little too far inland to directional drills, too long of a run to directional drills. So with this project, the last, I believe Ken said 1,200 linear feet are actually underneath the nearshore area, completely underneath the beach, underneath the dune system. That particular option to East Bay, to say if there was enough room to stage in the road and have that ramp to land 3 bolts, we would have to actually jet plow all the way in to there versus horizontal directional drilling, which would actually result in more impact to the aquatic environment, direct impact.
There was somebody, there was somebody in the back, I had a question.
Yeah.
I'll come to you.
Mark McAllister, from Austin, up here.
Speak up, Mike.
About future environmental liabilities and accountability of the substations. What's the decommissioning plans? When this runs out, I get the sense it's you get your money, there's big money in this, folks, okay, this is going to happen. I think to Z's point, I think we need to look at this from the standpoint of it's a benefit for the sewer system. This is a necessary evil for our sewer system. I think we need to get that into our heads. But back to my main question, environmental impact issues, what is the decommissioning plan?
Yeah. I'll answer both. First of all, I just want to point out that one of the things that the town insisted upon in the host community agreements was that the parts of the substation that have fluids are going to be put into kind of a giant bathtub, for lack of a better
Asking
word.
the question. I'm
Yeah,
aware of that.
yeah.
That's important.
So it's quite protective. We are under obligations to restore and decommission properly in accordance with all laws. There are performance bonds and other financial security instruments that will also be required of us to secure those obligations. So that's the.
In terms of the offshore.
Well, offshore and onshore.
Yeah. I just wanted that to be out there, so people know, is it going to be a junkyard across?
Let me also say, no, well, no, it's good.
Sorry, gentleman down front here.
Gordon Kraft, David Street. How long what's the economic and physical life of the farm itself?
So the turbines, somewhere between 25 and 35 years, they last. But also, let's just kind of big picture here. Climate change is only getting worse, not better. It seems highly likely that if we've got those foundations out in the water, rather than decommission it all, we will, we or someone else will put new turbines, probably better turbines than exist right now, to replace those, to keep that clean energy source, which is going to become increasingly precious, going. So initial life about 25 to 35 years, but I'd be really surprised as a country if we decided to demolish all of our offshore wind industry and not repurpose it.
Where do they go? Where does the dismantled pieces of the thing go? I understand that there might be landfill issues trying to just.
Well, they
rid
get
of them?
crushed, they get shredded into tiny pieces before they're deposited. But the industry is working on recycling those blades too. We've got some time to work that through.
And our brother company is actually leading a lot of the recycling efforts of future turbine blades, where our company's parent company is the Iberdrola group in Spain. That company is leading a lot of this sort of future planning for recycling.
Gentleman in the back, we have your name, please.
Fire Station Road. I'm sorry, I had a question that another gentleman had asked earlier about your initial analysis of Dowses, what, 2 or 3 years ago. You said it wasn't favorable, yeah, Craigville and the other public over there. But you listed as your main reason it was an environmental issue as well. That was one of the leading issues with Dowses. That's
Well, that gets to the
all of a
issue that
sudden, 3 years later, it's not an issue. What changed? You
Mark?
said climate change, you mentioned that, so I'm just curious.
You're talking about permit applications, sorry.
No, I'm just curious how it all comes together. You mentioned climate change, very good point, but yeah. All of a sudden, 3 years later, when this was environmentally impossible to do, according to you guys now.
Wait 1 sec. We never said it was
No, you
environmentally
didn't say
impossible.
it was
We said it was
impossible.
less
You said it was
preferable,
one of the main
less
reasons.
preferable. Well, we said it was less preferable, but Mark, why don't you talk a little bit about what we've learned as we dived into the engineering?
Sure. So again, the former characterization of that as less preferable was in former permit applications that were comparing it, against landfills that were available, right? So now Craigville and Cobbles isn't available, and so things that have changed is, there were additional engineering reviews on all of the landings for this project, right? Can we put it in Craigville? Can we put it in Cobbles? No. We looked at like 10 other locations. Dowses came back to Dowses to look at it. It was less preferable to Craigville or Cobbles for those first 2 projects. There were some engineering challenges with potentially having to micro tunnel underneath East Bay, which presented some potential additional environmental risk on that option. So that option wasn't there for Craigville and Cobbles for the first 2 projects. So hence the tag of less preferable. Now we've done is additional engineering analysis showing that we don't believe that we need a micro tunnel, and we can actually use the Causeway Road, raise it up at the culvert location and cross up the Causeway Road, leaving everything proposed in the existing paved portions of that facility in that area.
Just seems to me like you guys changed your mind. I'm not saying anything bad or anything, but it just seems to me like less preferable to go into those, just gonna jump like that is, because now you're at the other 2 locations, this is all stuck in one level.
Well, again,
I mean, I'm not being rude at all.
no, you're not being rude at all, but I just wanted the record to be clear. We never said it was a bad site. We never said it was an infeasible site. As we did for many other sites, we just said disqualified for probably about 20 of them. So we always thought it was a doable site, just not as good as those two. And as Mark pointed out, one of the things we were worried about was putting a micro tunnel through East Bay, which would have environmental consequences. The engineers, who are very good at solving problems, came up with a way to do this that doesn't involve that. So that's what's changed.
I have a question. Can you tell me, because we seem to have such good wind out the sun, how many of the projects are on your radar of Cape Cod?
For our company, no other projects are on our radar. We're using up our entire lease area from the federal government. We have no other lease area to pursue additional projects. Other companies are pursuing other
There
projects.
are many more leases available.
Yeah.
Gentleman in the,
Oh, good.
gentleman in the back in the blue shirt.
Can you tell me anything about the maintenance and like reliability of liability?
Yeah, I think Christina, that's a question you can address.
In terms of the operation, I think that they're similar to the other utilities that are underneath the roadways right now. They're going to be electric cables that are underneath the roadways. In general, we're not going to have to do anything with them unless something goes awry. So I think that would be us. Yep. So, the project includes the construction, the operation and maintenance, the eventual decommission, if that happens in, however many decades down the line. So yes, we hold the responsibility for construction and operation and maintenance. And it would be similar to electric lines that are out there right now.
Okay, let me go to the next Jim.
May I ask you, you must be aware of the problems with the cables that landed on a beach on Block Island coming up. The problem with boats throwing anchors and pulling cables up. And so I want to know, I still don't want you to be at Dowses Beach, quite frankly. I just think it's an awful place for you to do this industrial work. But what are your plans to avoid those problems?
Ken or Mark, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I can actually, thank you. So there, Block Island was a pilot project, and they did not achieve the burial depth that they should have, and lessons were learned also in the industry in general about depth of burial and installation procedures. As Ken had indicated before, horizontal directional drill will ensure that the last 1,200 feet of this cable system gets installed anywhere from 30 to 50 feet below the sea floor, and also below the beach and the dune system coming up into the parking lot. So
Are you going to go into the dune system?
underneath the dune system, nothing will be open cut on the beach or from 1,200 linear feet out in the near shore area all the way to the parking lot is all underground. Nothing on the surface gets touched. Yeah. Dunes get avoided, the beach gets avoided.
Was there somebody in the back? Yeah, somebody in the back has a question. Yes, ma'am.
So does heavy equipment drive across the dunes to actually do this?
No, and we can show the schematic again, but all activities are going to be limited to the paved parking lot. The access.
Little questions. Avangrid does some projects in other states on the East Coast.
Contacts,
You're doing
Projects?
Other projects.
onshore projects, yes.
No,
The only other offshore project we currently have an ownership interest is that one that I mentioned at the beginning in passing, the Kitty Hawk project in the Virginia, North Carolina. That's not as far along as these are.
So have you, other than Gregville and Cobbles Beach, have you come into any public beaches before this?
Well,
Your company.
our company, I think internationally, definitely yes.
International, sure.
Yeah, and well, the reason I bring that up is many people in our company who work in our Boston office are from Iberdrola. So there are people from Spain and Scotland who have built these projects with landings at public beaches. And one of the benefits we have, we're an American-based company, but we can tap into all the expertise of our European neighbors who frankly are ahead of us on this technology. This is our first project. So by definition, it's the first time we're going to land at a public beach. But that's why I showed that map earlier to show that cables, electric cables landing at public beaches are nothing new. They've been done for a long, long time. The technology is done, the horizontal drilling, all those things will be following those practices.
And just so folks see that, there's two cables owned by National Grid that power Nantucket. One runs under Dowses Beach in Hyannis, and then it proceeds up Ocean Street through Hyannis under the road, and then proceeds to Nantucket. And then there's another one from Harwichport as well. And then there are 4 Eversource owned cables from Falmouth to Martha's Vineyard, same from, I think the majority, I don't know the exact landing locations for each of them on both sides, but the majority are in public beach landings on either island or from the mainland on Cape Cod between Falmouth, Barnstable, and Harwich. So those are the black lines you see to the 2 islands in the image.
Is anybody else have a question out here? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Rose Sobel from Osterville. If by chance the federal government doesn't give you the permit necessary, what is your next step? Where are you going?
If the federal government says we can't build the project, we can't build a project, and then we might have legal rights to appeal. And we would have to, I assume, redesign the project in some way that's to the federal government's liking, but that they have to approve it in order for us to go forward.
I think she's asking, what would be your next choice?
Well, wait a second. I'm sorry. I thought what you were asking about was the federal government approving
No.
the offshore wind project.
No,
Oh.
Landing.
in Dowses Beach.
Christina, I'm gonna rely on you.
Restate the question for us.
Yeah.
If you don't get the federal permits, then you can probably get all the other ones. If you don't get them to do the work in Dowses Beach, well, next, you move on someplace else, you go back up.
So the way,
Other ideas of the other beaches.
the way it would work in the federal process is they would say, we think there's a better location and you should go there. We haven't identified one. They haven't identified one. It could happen and we'd have to deal with it. We haven't seen any evidence that that's what's on the federal government's mind. As you can probably imagine, most of the focus of the federal government is on the offshore activities, the turbines and the cable. That's really what they're focusing on. They do have jurisdiction, I believe, over the landing in some fashion, but that is more considered to be a state and local concern.
Yeah.
Neil Nightingale. I've asked this question of you before, I know, but you told us you can't go through Craigville Beach because I believe the road that goes up is not wide enough to carry all the cables.
That's part of the reason, yes.
Just a little bit more about
If
that.
the road taking is wide enough, would you use that as a location?
Well, one of the big challenges with that Craigville Beach landing, Gale, is crossing the Centerville River. So folks know coming out of Craigville Beach, if you go north on Craigville Beach Road, right where the intersection with Short Beach Road is, you actually cross the Centerville River. So for the Park City Wind Project, we're gonna have 2 cables landing in the west end of Craigville Beach, which is closest to Long Beach Road. And those cables are actually gonna go up Craigville Beach Road, and then they're gonna divert through a micro tunnel under the Centerville River, and then they'll proceed on the other side, the north side of the Centerville River, up Craigville Beach Road. So we're actually not keeping the cables for that project within the bridge that crosses the Centerville River. So as Ken Fitzgerald, our engineering consultant, said earlier, the concept of doing those 2 cables for Park City Wind and then 3 cables, another duct bank, another cement duct bank for a second project to come up Craigville Beach Road, crossing the Centerville River, was found to not be feasible. And for anybody obviously who knows that area, there's no real other road out of there. Craigville Beach going towards Centerville, sort of, I guess to the north, more to the west, or Craigville Beach Road down the other end of the road, going up towards Strawberry Hill where Vineyard Wind is using. Those are your only two ways out of that Craigville Beach Road, Craigville Beach area. So there's not another main road option other than that. That's an option, and we couldn't do a second duct bank crossing the Centerville River. We couldn't keep it under the bridge. So that was why it was eliminated. to do a second landing at Craigville Beach is really the beach parking lot is huge. We could do landings at, but how do you get out of there? What are road options?
Do a second tunnel through that way and then forget Dowses.
And
We
this
wouldn't
was,
get a sewer or any clean water.
yeah, but
Right,
again,
yeah.
this, when I started, when Ken started back in January, this is the first conversations we had with John and with Pete and Chuck and others from the OVA back in March. This was the first thing when I started back in January that our team was looking at is, can we find a way to land another project at Craigville Beach? Because the beach parking lot has plenty of space. We looked at it, our engineers looked at it 3 times, ordered to by our CEO. And we couldn't find a feasible way to do it. That's what led us to then, look at Dowses Beach.
Why not an offshore hub?
Let me just call on this gentleman in the back, please, if I may. You had a question, sir?
Right here, yeah. I just want to be clear, this is the first major offshore energy farm in the United States that we're talking about.
Utility scale offshore farm, yes.
Okay, so you have every desire, and every incentive to make sure it's a success, correct?
Correct.
Not only for you, but for the people affected.
100%.
Okay.
You had a question, also?
I did. You talk about the sewer lines through downtown Osterville. It's my understanding that the town's plan for sewer and wastewater treatment is over 35 years. Is there coordination between, you could put in a sewer line, but unless the town ties into it, what is it to us? I'm kind of seeing that as, yes, an incentive, but is the town prepared to fulfill the rest of what, that is at our funds, correct?
Our understanding is the town would only put in the sewer line as part of an overall wastewater treatment plan that would have all the homeowners hooking up to it and having a place for the wastewater to go to a treatment plant. So it's not just putting in a line and letting it sit there. It's putting in a line that's functional and part of an overall system.
But it's not in conjunction with your laying in a sewer line.
Well, we wait, just to be clear, we wouldn't be laying in the sewer line. We'd be opening the road. The town would lay the sewer line. We would share, as we talked about, design and engineering resources. We would, in the same road, roughly during the same time period, put in the electric cable. Then we would be responsible for covering it all up and recoding it. So the town would be doing the town sewer. We'd be doing the electric, but we'd be sharing some design resources, and millions of dollars worth of recoding would be on our nickel as opposed to the town's.
And has the town made that commitment to do that in conjunction?
No.
No.
Good here, for the Bible, that he's 100% in agreement, and they will do it.
But they'll only do it down Main Street in South County, not down Old Mill Road. There will be no sewer there.
Right,
sorry,
it's
no,
it's not
no,
in
no.
the plan, right?
Which road? Austinville, Wisconsin?
Well, let me get that out. This is a really important point.
Heather, did you have a question?
Sorry, the other way. I'm just gonna get the big map.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going the wrong direction, sorry. There, one more. There, sorry. Z, do you just want to restate that is important, and I neglected to point that
So
out.
in talking to the town engineer, Griffin Bowden, he told me, so did Mark L, to Dan Santos, that they do not believe that they would ever put the sewer line down Old Mill Road. So if the power line goes there, which it could, we get no benefit for the sewer, 0. Sewer's not going there. Longer term, 15, 20 years, there is a plan to bring sewer into the town of Osterville. It's on the books, they have to do it. Mass DEP is gonna make them do it, but it's way out. So, and to me, it's a timing benefit for us. It's disruptive, it's gonna be disruptive. I agree with Brian, terrible job. Let's hopefully get it right this time. Nobody wants to be on a roller coaster for 2 years, right? But we can get the benefit, if it can get done right, if the town can negotiate a good deal, there's a lot of ifs. But let's get the best deal we can. Let's try to get clean water. It's just so critical. Our water is dying, literally. It's
I
dying.
agree with that
Yeah.
completely. I think that, I don't think anybody has an issue with, clean water. clean air, clean everything. I think it's the location that people seem to have.
Where the dirty water is.
Well, the dirty water is everywhere. It's not restricted.
No, it's downtown Osterville. Actually, about 30% of the excess load, about 8,000 kilograms, is right around us right now. Done the math.
I'm gonna go to Heather, and then I'll take this gentleman over here in the blue shirt on.
Thank you, Heather Hunt. And I really just have a procedural question, nothing on substance. So when Mr. Els was here, and he'll be back on October 4th, which is great. He said he was concerned about speaking with you outside of the context of a host community agreement. So my question, and then I just want to give a little context. My question is the company willing to just talk with the town officials and with the community in an open, visible way outside of a host community agreement about routing and landing as this goes, just in light of all the public interest that you have here? And after Mr. L said that, there were a number of people who wanted to understand the process that the town used in the prior projects. It's really hard to find that information on the website. I mean, I would say almost impossible. So this could be wrong, but I just want to say that the question is, will you depart from the Park City process if the way I'm going to tell you what it is true? And if it's not true, would love to be corrected. It sounded that the council authorizes the town manager to enter into host community negotiations. It then becomes a confidential negotiation. The day it's signed, the company puts out a press release saying it's signed, it reflects community support. In that host community agreement that doesn't appear on the website anywhere, right? It's really, really hard to find those. But if you do found it, someone found it for us, the town within it commits to supporting the route that nobody knows yet, right? And it commits to supporting it in front of places like the Conservation Commission before anyone sees the route. After the press release goes out that says we've got this strong community support before we have a route, the signed agreement is done. It then goes to the council for a first read, which means they just sort of say, here it is. But there's nothing to comment on because there's nothing visible to the public. Then 2 weeks later, it goes for a second read and they act on approvals, deeds, even like spare deeds, like just in case deeds. But still nobody knows the route. And then they approve that. That's what it seems like, unless I've got it wrong. And other folks here who've looked it up have it wrong. And then later, the company decides the final route. So the question is, if that's right, are you willing to have a visible conversation? And when I say visible, I mean visible to the people conversation with our town hall and with everyone here before committing, before sort of going behind a closed door to negotiate all this stuff, so that everyone can continue to understand and that you end up at the end of the day with buy-in and transparency and visibility as you go. And I'm sorry it took so long with that.
Okay, so I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay.
It's possible that the lateness of the hour has caused me to not necessarily grasp your whole question. I'm going to give it my best shot. First of all, we see there's discussions on host community agreement. There's also discussions with the community. Those two things can happen at the very same time. That's actually, in fact, what happened with Vineyard Wind and with Park City Wind. All during the process that there were negotiations with the town manager over the HCA. There were meetings just like this, where Vineyard Wind and Park City Wind met with the community and heard their concerns. We are 2/3 of the way through the permitting of the Park City Wind process before the HCA even got signed. And so there were years of public input and attendance. And so I just want to push back a little bit in a friendly way on the premise that in the prior projects, the town manager and our company negotiated something and no one knew what the route was, or no one knew what the facts were, because that isn't actually what happened.
Can I ask a question? when you signed it in May, you signed the
That
host
sounds right.
community agreement, put out a press release the same day. The agreement wasn't public at that point. It wasn't publicly available. And when it went to the council, it still wasn't publicly available. And there still isn't a route. So you've got council action without a route,
There is a route. There's a route.
not a decided route.
Well, yeah, no, there's a route, landing at Craigsville Beach
Yeah,
and ending up at the substation. The only thing that's still being discussed, and we're going to a Centerville Civic Association meeting on
Right.
Thursday,
Right.
is whether we're gonna go this alternative or we're gonna go down, and that is still being negotiated, still being discussed with the neighbors.
but you have all your signups from everybody.
No,
Yeah.
you don't have the conservation
No, we haven't
commission
even-
permit.
But
We
the,
have set aside Cape Cod Commission ad for Park City.
well, you know, if another time, at an earlier point in time, I think it would be excellent to go through the community host agreement to see what the town commits to
Yeah.
during its process, so everyone
So
understands.
first of all, if you don't have them, I'm happy to send them to you.
I have them now.
Yeah, okay,
But
there
I
should
think,
be, yeah.
and this is really, I'm not giving a hard time, this is just about.
You're not giving me a
like,
hard time.
visibility.
But the point I really want to make is, we are going to be in this community talking to you about this project for the next 2 years and all these various permitting processes. You will have an opportunity to have those discussions with us, regardless of whether the town negotiates an HCA or not. You'll eventually have a town councillor, maybe you'll know it tonight, who that is. I know that in the other two projects, the town councillor was very involved in the HC negotiations for those two projects. In
So
terms of-
that wouldn't have been visible to anyone.
It may
Right.
not have been, and I know one of you made that point to Mark Ellis at the meeting, so I'm sure he's gonna think about whether we should, have a different sort of process. We're open to that. I just really want to make sure that no one thinks for a second that we're negotiating some backroom deal with the town manager that shuts the public out, because that is not the case.
So I'm just gonna say one final thing. I would love for you to go home and tell your spouse or your cousin or your neighbor. People who don't know, go try to see what happened and when it happened and when it was visible to a member of the public. Super hard.
Okay, well,
And we're just asking you if you could make it
that's fair.
more visible.
We will make it
invisible.
more visible.
And I will say, Heather, we're in the process of building out Barnstable specific pages on both parkcitywind.com and commonwealth.com, but I think we'll have a lot of what you're looking for. And honestly, I think the last thing we're waiting for, the town council on September 1st made further final modifications to the HDA for Park City Wind. Once that's final, they made some changes because of Power Article 97 easements were made. I think we do plan to, just like Vineyard Wind has its host community agreement on its website on the Barnstable page on vineyardwind.com. We plan to do that for parkcitywind.com as well, and have active Barnstable pages on both projects.
Okay, gentleman over here in the blue jacket. You had a question.
Thank you. Steve Costello from Osterville. Just a couple of observations, really no questions, other than just in terms of the timeline, assuming, permits are put in and approved. Is this a 8-10 year permitting process, or what's generally the timeline?
We're expecting to receive all of our federal, state, local, regional permits by approximately January of 2025.
Okay, so it's a lot closer than we talked about. So just a couple of things, maybe to piggyback on Heather's point. Two things, you can and you may, should the town refuse or not be inclined to have a host agreement. What are the circumstances where a town doesn't choose to participate in a host agreement? Does that eliminate your ability to file your permits and still proceed?
Not at all.
Okay.
Many companies don't bother with a host community agreement.
So that's an interesting question, because I think there's a lot of people in the room that will never agree to any kind of landfall at Dowses, and that's just their opinion. Whether you can mitigate it based on the presentation tonight, that remains to be seen. But then the bigger question becomes, if in fact we are going to get the best benefit and the best deal for the town of Barnstable and the residents of Osterville, of which myself and my grandchildren hopefully will be able to stay here. Having the sewer run through where 30% of the issues lie in terms of where the water needs to be sewered. I know that there's a lot of people that don't want it to run through the Main Street district. So if the point is to have a discussion around, we want to be part of the negotiation to run it down Five Corners or Old Mill Road, and it doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint for the town to then sewer those lines, what we're really talking about is saying no to the most obvious and probably the most efficient way to do it. So that then becomes the question. Do we just say no and use that as our kind of negotiating tactic? We're going to say no and not be part of it, or are we going to figure out a way to make it work to our advantage? And regardless of what the permitting process is, because if we don't have any sort of negotiating power up front, then whatever you choose to do, and should you get those permits, you're going to probably run it right down Main Street anyway, without sewers, I'm assuming. Is that correct in terms of your process? If the town said, you know what, we don't want to participate, we're going to dig up the road and run this thing right through Dowses and right down, Main Street as it is. If the town says, we're not participating, you'll dig up the road and you'll put in your electric cables, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Yes, ma'am. You had a question over the lady over here, had a question.
Karen Birmingham, Hill River. We've talked a lot about the details of this, but nobody's talked about the money. What do you expect this project to cost? And are you dividing it in thirds because of the 3 different locations? And so you could answer that.
Sure, I'm going to ask Christina, the project director, to answer that.
Sure. So, you're right. So these 3 projects are similar in scale, right? The first project, Vineyard Wind 1, is 800 megawatts. The Park City Wind project is 800 megawatts. This project, Commonwealth Wind, is 1,200 megawatts. So it's a little bit bigger. We are developing our cost estimates. We basically, these projects, like any project, goes out to bid for the large components. We have to buy turbines and foundations and have contractors install all of this work. So we really won't know the cost of the project until all the bids are in. That's going to be a multi-year process. But to give you a sense of the scale of the project, the Vineyard Wind 1 project that is, maybe halfway constructed, right? The things are in at Koval's. We have one more off-season construction period to go. That project at 800 megawatts, the financing for that project was $2.3 billion. Commonwealth Wind is a little bigger, and we're in a different climate, I would say global economy, than we were when that one was negotiated a couple of years ago. So that hopefully gives you a sense of the scale of how big the project is.
And what is your current investment in these 3 areas to date?
Oh, to date? Boy, that's an interesting question. I would have to really look up what the Vineyard Wind 1 has invested so far. Park City Wind, as has been mentioned, is still in the permitting phase. So we're in the development phase. The development phase in the beginning is a much smaller piece of, the big bulk of the cost are the turbines and the installation offshore. The substations onshore are a big piece as well. The cables are a big piece, but the development, what we're doing right now is kind of a sliver of the overall project cost. So
I think the question is who's paying for it and how much.
yeah, so the development is paid by Avangrid, right? So we're paying right now
I understood.
for us to be here. Yep, we're all here, and the engineers and the consultants that we have, it's all paid by Avangrid. But when it comes to, if we get all of our permits, then we go out with financing for construction to ultimately get the big components and whatnot. Yep. And
Again, to the comment earlier.
Excuse me, Jerry, you have a question? You have a question in the back? You all set? Okay. Go ahead.
No. You go ahead.
Just one more follow-up question on construction. Just a little bit of math. Someone said it was 40 feet per day for sewer, but you guys could do 200 feet per day?
100 to 200 feet per day.
100 to 200, but someone, I don't know if they're correct, they said 30 to 40 on the sewer.
That's from the sewering meeting I just attended.
Okay, so I'm at Koval's Beach. And going to Starry Hill Road. That's less than a half a mile. Or about 2,800 feet, right? Why is it taking 9 months already to go that half mile? And we're gonna go back in for another 9 months. This doesn't tie up. Why can't we get that part done? That little short section, that's only from Dowses Beach to East Bay Road.
It's a great point, Mark. I don't know every intricate detail, but one thing I know in terms of a learned lesson for us was the, on that route, the Avangrid Wind team and the town's contractor and Mark Bergeron or others, step in if to correct me, were basing their plans off where they thought, based on all what was filed by National Grid and by Commonwealth, of where the water lines were physically under the road and where the gas lines were. When they ripped up on the road, they got a lot of surprises of the gas line and water lines not being where they were supposed to be, because they were basing that off of prior filed plans with the town, et cetera. So there was, as anybody who gets the Test Dunleavy from Vineyard Wind's emails around shore construction notices, all that, there was a lot of water main relocation, even some National Grid gas location, especially on Strawberry Hill Road, partly because of needing to adjust, et cetera. What we've done for Park City Wind, which we're hoping is going to be a big help going forward to avoiding that, avoiding some of that, a lot of that is inevitable, is that we've done a ground penetrating radar survey of both routes. So both of all these routes included, we did a survey of exactly what's under the road. It was like a radar X-ray image. So exactly where the comm water line is, this entire route is in the comm water district, and exactly where the National Grid gas line is, and other unknown utilities, other surprises that we'll know, inactive old utilities, other things that are under the roads that we don't know. We're doing sort of an X-ray of those to anticipate that better. The hope is, it's not perfect, but the hope is that that'll avoid some of those surprises and be able to plan where exactly the sewer main is going to be, and the electric duct bank, cement encased duct bank is going to be, based on having a much better accurate idea of exactly what's under the roads before it come up. That's a hope.
I understand the other utilities are very difficult time-wise to deal with, to his point earlier. Because if you run into another electrical line, or something else that's underground, you've got to wait for them to move it.
Yeah.
So is that part of the delay?
Yeah, we're gonna get ahead by doing the ground penetrating radar survey. And what is that unknown utility? We can source that with the utility companies and have a better idea as we're putting together plans. As Ken Fitzgerald and the Stantec team are doing that, of what's under there that we can anticipate in advance to make our plans more accurate, so that we can stay on a better schedule by having that information in advance, instead of getting surprises when we rip open the road.
One more follow-up question. How are you getting across that bridge or causeway, whatever they call it? It's longer than the Dowses one going from Craigle Beach.
So we have an option agreement to purchase a home at 2 Short Beach Road. Our intention is to use that as a staging site. And 2 Short Beach Road is if you're going north on Craigville Beach Road, and Short Beach Road is on your left, the sort of second loop of Short Beach Road. It's a property right in the corner, right where the bridge is, where there's been the bridge jumping. That's a big problem in that area. So we're going to micro tunnel the cables under the Centerville River from that property. And then we'll work through our permitting process with the Barnesville Conservation Commission, Cape Cod Commission, and we have an active relationship with the Short Beach Road Neighborhood Association of determining the future use of that property, whether we deed it to the Barnesville Land Trust, or we'll find the disposition for that property. But that's how we'll cross that Centerville River.
Any other questions for this group? Or we break tonight? Anyone else have any questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.